Hello guys and welcome. My name is Caleb. We're still on our Python programming series, and in this section we're going to be looking at object-oriented programming. Let's go further to see what we're going to get out of this course. In our previous courses in this section, in our previous sections in this series rather, we've looked at functions, dictionaries, and other data types. Now, in this section, we are going to be trying to define what object-oriented programming is about, and then after we're done with that, we're going to see how we can be able to create classes and create instances of these classes, and then we are going to define actions that can be taken by these instances. That is, after we've created instances, we're going to define the actions that can be created with these instances. Don't worry, by the time we go into the course, you're going to understand some of these terms here. And then we are going to also write classes that extends functionality of existing classes. Now, I would point out a few things before I continue, and one of them is that teaching object-oriented programming can be very tough to teach, like to explain for you to understand, and it could take a while for you to grasp the necessary information. So I would recommend that you can repeat the video until you understand it, because whatever you learn here, you can apply it to other programming languages that makes use of object-oriented programming. All you just have to do is to understand the syntax of the program and how it works, and then you can go on with the program or the language. So what is OOP, which is object-oriented programming? Object-oriented programming is a method of programming that attempts to model some process or thing in the world as a class or object. Now let me break this down. When we talk of object-oriented programming, it's like trying to create something in code that does not really exist. We take, for instance, we've been using integer, and then integer on its own is a class which has some other features which I'm going to show you. Now, some of these things, like for example, integer, list, and the rest of them, they are already built into Python. Now, let's take, for instance, you want to model a dog class, or you want to model a car. Some of these ones are not in Python. So for you to be able to model this thing, that is what, and make it look nice and readable, that is where object-oriented programming comes in, and that is what this is trying to explain. Okay, in object-oriented programming, you write classes that represent real-world situations and things, just like I just said, and you create objects based on these classes. So what is a class? A class is simply a blueprint for objects. I'm going to go into code soon. I just want to take my time to explain some of these things so that when I go into the code and I'm typing, you understand what I'm doing. So classes can contain methods and attributes. So we've looked at functions, and we saw how we can define a function using the def keyword. Now classes contains functions as well, but inside of a class it is not called function, it is called method. So let's take note of that. And then when you write a class, you define the general behavior of the whole category of an object. For instance, like I said, well, if you want to model a car class, which I think we have an example for that in the course, we can start by creating the specific things the car should have, and then like the name of the car, the model, and the year. And then after that, inside of the class, we can begin to give some general behavior of the cars, like the odometer, that is the mileage, and some other features which we're going to see for a car example. And we're going to also see some more examples which will make us understand. This video might be quite lengthy, but I'll split it into parts so you understand. So let's talk about something else, which is called instances. Now we have created a class. In order for you to use the class, you're going to create what is known as an instance of that class. So creating an object from a class is known as making an instance of that class. I want you to understand this very well. Now we've created a class, and then we want to use that class. In order to use that class, we can make as many instances as we want from the class. And now what happens is that whenever you make an instance from a class, the instance contains all the behavior in the class. So when you create individual object from a class, each object is automatically equipped with the general behavior. You can then give each object whatever unique traits you desire. I believe you understand this, but let me try to explain it again. Now I've created the class, and then from the class I create an instance, a particular instance, let's take for instance, now that particular instance will have all the features of the class, and then I can add some more features I need, and then I can create another instance of that class which will also have the same features of that class, and then I can also add some more instances to it. So there are four main principles of object-oriented programming, which we're going to be seeing in examples as we go on. So they are polymorphism, data abstraction, inheritance, and encapsulation. All right, as we go further, I'll try to explain all of these things in details and examples so that we get to see them. So now let us go further now and we jump into our code and see how we can create classes and use classes. Now we can model anything using classes, but now in this example we're going to start by making a customer class. Let me simply go into my code and begin to type. Now I have created a file called classes.py, and to create a class we use the class keyword. So we use class and then we type whatever we want to do. Now in this case I want to model a customer class, customer, and then after that we put this symbol, a colon symbol. Now by convention you can write your name however you wish, but by many developers and programmers they use the camel case, which starts with capital letters. So if I want to write customer cares, I'll do something like this. It should start with a capital letter. Now this is simply a class. If I save this and I try to run this code, Python 3 classes.py, sorry, I got a new keyboard and I'm still trying to get used to it. Now we can see that we got an error here. So in order for this to work, and I have my linter installed, that is why it's already indicating, giving me a red error sign here. So if I want to use this class but I don't want to give in the details yet, what I'll do is just to put the keyword inside, pass. And now if I save this and run this code again, you see nothing happens. This is how we create a class. All right, now I talked about making instances. So if I want to make an instance of this class, I will simply type, I want to make an instance of the class. Let's say I want to call this customer 1. I'll give this customer 1 and then I'll pass in the customer class inside. So if I save this now and I run, nothing still happens. But then if I print customer 1, so if I print customer 1, let's see what gets printed here. Now it's telling us that we have inside, we have a main .customer, which is this class, and then it is stored in a particular location. So we can try to print the type of customer 1. So if I try to print the type of customer 1, now we can see now that we have, it is a class. So I can make another instance. I'll just duplicate this and call this customer 2, and let's print customer 2 as well. So if I do this and I save now, you see we have customer and customer, but when I remove the type, you see they are both classes. But when I remove the type, and you see that they are different objects stored in different memory locations. I'll clear this up. So if I print that again, you see that they are different classes stored in different locations. So these are known as instances. So this is how we can create a simple class that does nothing. So let's go back to our, all right, now I have explained this. We create a class like this, and then a function that is part of a class is called a method. And it is worth noting that everything you have learned about functions applies to the method which we're going to be creating inside the class, and we're going to be seeing that now. Okay, now I have also talked about creating instances of a class, so I'm going to quickly skip this because of. Alright, now let's talk about a particular method inside of a class which is known as the init method. And then you would know that every class should have an init method. So what is an init method? The init method is a special method Python runs automatically whenever we create a new instance based on a class. So the init method is immediately called, immediately an instance is made. I'll explain all of this in the code. Now this is an example. So let us come back to our code. I'll comment this out. Okay, I'll just start from here. So I'll define a class called, I'll define a method rather called init, and it starts with 2 underscore, and then it starts with 2 underscore and ends with 2 underscore, and then we close this, and that is it. This is how the init method is defined. So if we come here and whatever you see something inside of the init method which is called self, but you can give it any name of your choice, and I'll tell you what it does very soon. But by convention, most developers, just for the sake of consistency, they use self. So if you're using something else and another developer is looking at your code, the developer might get confused. So it is preferable you use self, which I'll explain. Now I want to print something in this class which is called let's just print something here which says a customer has been created. So if I save this, and I'll comment this out for now. Okay, I'll just comment everything out and leave only the first one. So what happens is that once I run this class, you see this gets called up immediately, which is what this is trying to tell us, that the init method is called immediately an instance is made. So you can see that I did not do any other thing here. I did not call this method. Remember, if we want to call a function inside, if we want to call a function, we're supposed to use the dot notation. But in this case, I did not call it. I just created my class and I called the class. So if I am to comment this and save to as well, you realize that it will be printed twice. That means for each instance, this init method is called. So that is one thing you should take note of in this section, that whenever you call an instance of a class, this init method is automatically called. You don't have to call it on it, or you don't have to call it, it gets called automatically. So moving further, all right, I have given this, I've said this, so let's go further. And then we're going to talk about the self parameter which we have given inside of here. So what is the self parameter and what is it about? So the self parameter is required in the method definition, and it must come first before other parameters. So if you're defining a method inside of a function, inside of a class, you should put the self parameter if you are trying to define that. So we're going to see some examples. As we go further now, we're going to see, and then you should also take note that it is the first it should be the first parameter inside of the method. So in this case, we just have only the self, but in a couple of seconds from now, we're going to be adding some other things inside of here so that we will see how it works. So it must be included in the definition, because when Python calls the init method and later to create an instance of the customer class, the method will automatically call. I've talked about this. All right, now we want to define a customer class that should have a first name and a last name. So quickly, I'll take this out and I'll just remove all of this up till this point so that we have something clean to work with. Now, if we want whatever parameter we want to use, after we've given the self, which we said it should come first, we have to define the first one. We want to take the first name, and then we also want to take the last name. Okay, all right, now we've taken that. For us to be able to use it inside of the function, we have to pass the self, which is referencing all of them, since we're going to be using them inside. The self.firstName, we can call it whatever we want, but like to follow convention, self.firstname equals first name. So I'll tell you what's happening here. Now we want to use, I'll save this so that error sign goes away. Now we want to use self. We want to use the first name inside of here. Now what happens is that the first name that is collected from the instance is passed here, and then it is stored inside the first.self name first name rather. So, and then we'll do the same thing for the other one, self dot last name equals last name. All right, and now we have defined this. All right, now what we're going to do now, I'll save this, and now I'm going to create another instance of a class customer1, and then I'll just customer1. Nothing happens because we've not done anything with this with the information, but now we get an error. The error is that we have not passed in the first name and the last name. So I'll pass in my name as the first name, Caleb, and then the other one I'll pass in my other name, Chinon. So okay, now the error goes away and I've passed it in. So what happens is that it has moved in and it is stored. So now I'll begin to work with some other methods. Now I'll first of all create a method here. Let's call this method full name. So what the method should do is that it should take my first name and concatenate it with my second name and print out my full name. So what I'm going to do now is, inside of this, because I want to use this information that is here, I'm going to pass in the self parameter only inside there. If I'm also going to use some other things, I should include them here, which we're going to see as we continue. But for now, we're just using this information that has been provided. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, inside of this we want to give a full name, so I'll just return, or let's use the print. I'll be printing my full name. Okay, this is self dot first name, and then I'm using the f string self dot last name. Okay, now I have saved. I'll save this now. So sorry, I want to still reiterate on this so you'll understand what's happening here. We're taking, let me reduce this a bit so you can see. Now I created a customer instance with my name, first name and last name, and then what happens is that it is stored here. First name is stored here, last name is stored here. So, and then this init takes it and stores the first name inside self.firstname, and then the last name is stored in self.lastname. So in order to reference this inside whatever method we're using in the class, we have to include the we have to include what we have here, not what we have here. I believe you should understand this now. So if I save this and I run this, nothing is still going to happen. Okay, so for us to use a method, we have created an instance. So to use this instance, I'm going to call customer1 dot the name of the method, which is full name, and it's a method, or if it's a function or a method inside the class. So I'm going to put this, and if I should run again, you see my name gets printed here. So that is a basic class that has a method in it. I can also go further to say let's print my initials. Okay, I'll just the first name and initial. So I'll say I'll create a class first name underscore initial. Okay, so let's see how we can do this. For the I'm going to still print, and then an f string. I want my first name, which is which is self dot first name, and then I also want the initial of my last name, which I'm going to do self dot last name, but in the last name I only want the first index, the first value in there, that's 0. So if I should save this now and I run again, okay, let's call the class customer1 dot first initial. So if I save this and I run now, you see I have Caleb C. So you can see I can try to do something else here, put a dot at the end here so that it looks okay. So you can see what we can do with this. So there are a couple of things I want to also show us, but let's go back to our slides and see what we have here. Now I have talked about this, I have talked about some of these. Okay, now we can also try to access some of these attributes individually. Let's take, for instance, still on this, if I want to, I'll comment the functions. I was supposed to do this first. Okay, now if I want to just check the first name, I'm going to give customer1 dot first name. If I should just run this, and so if I should just run this, and if I want to see it, I have to print it out. So if I do this, I am accessing just the first name, as well as if I want to access the last name, I will do the same thing. So you can see this is how we can access individual elements in the class. So individual attributes rather. So I have also talked about how we can call methods and using the full name I have given. Okay, now we're going to see some more examples, and that should be in the next section because this is getting full. So I'm going to stop this video here, and in the next section we're going to look at more examples. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you have questions to ask, my email is in this section. You can send me an email, and I'll do well to reach back to you.